here's the kicker. You cannot retire from the meta crisis. You cannot retire from the meta crisis. If you're getting towards the wintering of your life, then you are the fastest growing cohort of people in the world. There are going to be more over 65s in 2080 than under 18s. It has to be engagement. It has to be involvement. It has to be community. It has to be wisdom. It has to be...
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with me, Dan Burgess. The story of Spaceship Earth is simple. We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. Like a spaceship, we have a finite amount of supplies with an intelligent operating system called nature, which keeps everything replenished as long as we all respect it and participate wisely. In this podcast, I'm in conversation with folk involved in regenerating life, shifting consciousness and reimagining how we can live more beautifully and peacefully. I talk with artists, writers, activists, designers, adventurers, healers, farmers, creative mavericks, and more. Their stories invite us to participate in the co-creation of life-sustaining cultures, in service to life, becoming crew on Spaceship Earth. Greetings, Earthling. Welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast. Thank you for tuning in. This is Dan, your host and guide. Welcome. This is the last episode of the year that was 2025, as I crawl to some kind of resting spot, melting spot, composting spot in the dark somewhere, hopefully in front of a fire. And yes, I'm sure you're probably doing the same. Congratulations for still being here, alive in this moment. That's quite an achievement these days. So first up to say, if you are a regular listener, thank you for supporting the podcast this year. I'm not going to lie, it's a lot of work to keep this thing going. This podcast project ebbs and flows with the rhythm of my life. It's probably a classic case study of how not to do a podcast. I've completely given up on the sort of, repetition, releasing on the certain days of the week and every 2 weeks. It's just all too exhausting. That whole productivity, endless grind. It's an overwhelm that's just not necessary anymore. So I've stopped doing that. But saying that, next year will be the 8th year of this project, and perhaps in podcast terms that makes us an elder of sorts, which brings me nicely to this final episode of the year, and I think a perfect one to sit with as we enter this darker, slower liminal time. This is a conversation with Sam Crosby, an oral storyteller and myth-informed guide. This episode was recorded around the fire at Ghostwood Down, which is becoming my favourite place to host conversations. This was two men sitting in the half-light, speaking honestly about what it means to search for meaning in a world that feels increasingly senseless. Sam's work weaves together story, psyche, ancestry, eldership, and the living earth. This was a long, rich exploration. For 2 hours we wandered, and returned again and again to the mythic ground beneath our feet. The place modernity keeps trying to concrete over, it feels. But there were threads that we were carrying throughout this conversation. We explored myth as meaning-making in chaotic times. We spoke to artificial intelligence and the hunger for wisdom, how humanity is generating intelligence and information way faster than we're generating wisdom, and how mythic ways might help us meet this moment. We dug deep into eldership, why modernity grows olders but not elders, and what it would take to revive cultures of eldership. We got into a favourite of mine, thresholds and rites of passage, and the loss of communal holding, and the consequences now for identity and belonging that we're seeing everywhere in the culture. We explored stories as living beings and how they reveal themselves when we slow down enough to listen. And we chipped away at the crisis beneath the crisis, the starvation of imagination and the meaninglessness of these times, which creates a kind of gaping void for orientation. So, this conversation was a proper meandering riff, the stuff I love to host here. It was a co-searching, if you like, not for answers, but pathways. It was a remembering of sorts. In some ways, it felt like doing mythic work, enacting eldership, metabolizing meaninglessness into orientation. And we were holding the AI question not as a technical fear, but as a cultural threshold. Sam is a wonderful human being who speaks beautifully with great humility, courage and imagination, and is doing really extraordinary work, especially the project on rekindling cultures of eldership, which we speak to at length here and I link to in the show notes. So if you listen and you receive something, please let us know. We're always really curious to what comes up for people in these conversations. If you do receive, please share it with someone else who might appreciate it. This is the spirit of reciprocity, which as far as we can tell is how life works on Spaceship Earth. And of course, most importantly, if you're feeling something through this conversation, take a step into action. Convene some elders. Open up this conversation. And if you want to connect into Sam's work and these projects, you can find the links in the show notes. And if you like what we're doing here, the best way to keep in touch, to receive all future episodes, to receive my writing, to find out about gatherings and courses that we offer as the Becoming Crew Action Learning Collective, sign up to the Substack, becomingcrew.substack.com. And if you're feeling super generous and you really love it around here, you might want to flip to a paid subscription. And I just want to say a special big thanks and a huge gratitude to the group of listeners who are subscribing financially, offering a monthly payment to this project to contribute to the running costs. We see you. We are so grateful for your support, and it would be amazing if we might bring a few more on board next year. Anyway, let's do it. This is the Spaceship Earth podcast in conversation with Sam Crosby. Enjoy.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Sam, welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast, and welcome to Ghostwood Down. Two big welcomes.
Yeah, thank you. I feel welcome. The fire is going.
I know, it's good to see you, and it's good to be here. And where are we? We're Friday, and it's the Samhain threshold. And it's just lovely to be up here. I haven't been up here for a couple of weeks, and it's just changed a lot.
yeah. That colouring is happening, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it feels good. I was hosting a little session this morning on Zoom, but to be here around the fire in our roundhouse with you feels like a real treat, actually.
Yeah. The strange time warp of it all that comes up in podcasts as well. Whatever we say today, how relevant will this be when whoever it is that's listening to this is listening to it? Are we still the same beings? Are we still feeling the same feelings?
You know what? It's true, very true, isn't it? It's a moment, a snapshot of one moment in amongst many that may or may not land into other people's moments some point down the line in the future.
Yeah. So hello to all of us, all of it. Yeah. Hello, everything.
Welcome in, everyone. So usually I would say, whereabouts are you on Spaceship Earth? But you are here. You're here on the Ghostwood Down in the Roundhouse. But how are you showing up?
Oh, good question. I got into the habit a little while ago of not answering that question until I'd asked it of myself. And I'm recognizing now in going to answer it that I haven't asked myself that today. Yeah, I'm good. I feel whole enough to speak about some of the challenges that are going on in the world, some of the work that we're doing around it. And yeah, I'm hesitant to just say I'm good and move the conversation along, but I do feel good. I feel whole. Yeah. How are you? How are you showing up today?
How am I showing up?
Yeah.
I'm quite fatigued in the body.
Yeah.
I am definitely wanting to slow down, but I'm definitely, my harvest has not finished, so to speak. It still appears that some things are growing and needing quite a lot of attention. There's a bit of me that just wants it to be slow, but I think I'm just, maybe that's also because I was saying this morning, I'm definitely sort of needing to let go of some things. And I keep telling myself I need a bit more time to really think about what those things are, and do you know what I mean, and space, and to and I'm not finding that I'm carving that space out, and then I'm thinking, is that space ever going to carve out?
Yeah. Well, it's, as I mentioned to you just before we got going up the top there, it's that kind of recognition that the change of speed is feeling, to me at least, as important as the speed itself. So I'm good at going fast when I need to. I'm good at going slow, but it seems to be I always change quickly between fast and slow. There's something about the opportunity to slowly change speed. If I've been going fast for so long, I don't want to get the bends. You know what I mean? I don't want to shift gear so quickly that it doesn't stick. The more slowly I can move from fast to slow, the more likely I'll stay slow, and that's feeling powerful. That's feeling like something that's a good ally. And I'm hearing it a bit in the way you're describing. I think that it's what is it? It's Samhain, the end of harvest, but there's still stuff to be harvested. Well, what does it mean to slowly come to that recognition?
Yeah, I blame it on climate change because everything just happened later this year for me. And I think I just started later with everything. I'm excited to do this here with you. It's lovely to have, actually this ash, even just have this ash. This was from a tree next door to me, and my neighbour had to take a big bough off at the end of last year. And I said, can I have some of that? And it's an ash that I have a really beautiful relationship with that particular tree. And it's an old one, and it's still healthy. But it's shaded me. My studio is under it at the bottom of the garden. It's all kinds of other beings visit and hang out in that tree. And so it's like, I chopped up some of it a few weeks ago. I thought I was going to burn it at home. And then when I knew we were coming up to do this, we've kind of run out of wood up here. All the hazel that we had harvested has gone. So I'm like, I'll bring up a bunch of that ash. So it feels not, I'm feeling grateful for the ash and and it feels nice to have that, to burn it here for this conversation.
Yeah.
I guess before we go in, I guess something that I'm always curious about is how, we're living in a time where there's seemingly a lot going on and people are experiencing the world in many different ways, and perhaps that's always been the way, and perhaps it's just because the dominant way feels so challenging, at least to me. Like, what are you experiencing in the ecosystems that you're part of, let's say, right now on Spaceship Earth? How would you describe things?
Oh, so the metaphor is so rich for Spaceship Earth, and let's see where we go with that curiosity that I have as we go along. But just to pick up on the top line that you always introduce with these episodes is crew and passengers, and I think in the spaces of crew that I have around me, Bio-Leadership Fellowship, to mention one, a Band of Brothers charity that I volunteer for is another, and just as those two examples, it's people coming up fully into spaces, showing up, in the grief and the gratitude and the willingness to feel and be present and to be noticing, which, it seems to be that the more noticing one does, the more gratitude one can find. But also at the moment, I'm experiencing real, deep-seated grief and confusion. And honestly, what's been going on for the last couple of years in the broader narrative of the world, the kind of the peeling back of it, given that we have such good access, technologies everywhere, everything's videoed, everything's shared. And that's another story, what that's going to look like in the next few years when we don't know what's real and what isn't anymore. But I'm knocking on the door of 40, and I'm having this experience of being told that Santa isn't real again. Recognizing just how deep some of the roots of the challenges are. That's really what I'm experiencing. And I'm interested in, you'll hear me say this a lot if we spend any kind of time together, but I'm interested in this word wisdom, on the back of a phrase a friend gave me once, which was, wisdom isn't learning something new, it's being reminded of what you've always known. And that kind of making an intelligence of remembering, self-reflection as activism, that mode of stopping to try to remember what you deeply know, what you've always known, what you know in your bones, in your roots, in your place, in your children, in your water, in your ground. That opportunity for me is where I want to put my focus as we speed into artificial intelligence and continue to use good business sense and measure things with GDP. I'm really interested in what wisdom might do. So that's an incomplete answer, but it's there are bits all poking in at each other, and the headline for me is opportunity.
Because you mentioned like crew spaces. So what about passenger spaces? I suppose that's what I mean by the Santa thing. The Okay, well, let me give you my. When I first heard you speak about Spaceship Earth, and then got to learn something of your way and the stuff you were interested in, the people you're surrounded by, it didn't. I felt a rub. It felt quite a difficult metaphor to work with when we're talking about lifeful ways of living. To come in with, sci-fi, technology, heightened. And the journey that I've gone on with that is recognizing that I described myself as a wannabe animist for a while. Desperately would love to be an animist, but I'm not, is what I said. And then I realized that actually I was trying to make animism fit with my logical frame of reference. Trying to believe that this bench has a soul doesn't work on what I was raised in. But I can put my hand on the thing. I can put my hand on this grain. I can be in a meeting, in a conference, and be enamored by the grain of the desk that I'm sat over. And that's a version of animism that I can get down with. And somebody said to me once, did the minerals in your laptop ask to be taken out of the ground? And so all of a sudden, a spaceship as a metaphor for what life is, what human life is,
we're speaking into microphones. There's a phone nearby. That started to double down and started to make sense and gave me access as an animist. And so the crew and the passengers part, what I'm noticing, and I'm talking about my friends here more than anything else, the passengers seem to be noticing the crew. The passengers seem to be noticing the crew, and it's happening for me in the strangest ways. In groups, it's still lowest common denominator. It's still whoever's fastest with the joke gets the quick laugh. We move on in the pub, whatever else. But one-on-one, you get taken aside. In a conference, working with business people, taken aside. Those little questions of what is happening to me, or what does that mean, or where can I go next, or what's that sort of... There seems to be a kind of... a burgeoning curiosity that I'm noticing whether or not I'm crew, which I'm sure that's the whole thing, isn't it? Well, of course I'm crew. Whether I'm not. The more I behave in a way that I think is congruent with that idea, the more I see people coming towards me and wanting in private spaces to explore what's happening to them.
Beautiful. It's a ongoing inquiry, and of course, everything is Earth. Right, I mean, everything is Earth, so potentially everything is spaceship.
Yeah.
So we've been like, bit of context for listeners. I think I've been always very curious about what you're up to, as I am with all everyone I invite onto the podcast, because I just get a very strong sense that you're doing something that feels really vital and interesting and needed. And not that I claim to know what it is, but there's just something. And so I guess, and there's some very live elements of what you're working with that we're going to get into in this conversation. But you work a lot with storytelling, oral storytelling. Myth, which we're going to speak to, because that's a sort of a big kind of that can open up. It's a bit like the spaceship, really. As well as guiding, facilitating, coaching, all the things, the many things that many of us, I believe, have to do in some ways to be able to sort of have feet in different parts of this world that we are living in right now, in this moment. I always like to help listeners have a bit of context around, I guess, why you are doing what you're doing before we get into it. Give them a little sense of like, what is it? And also because, we know that back to the passenger and crew, this kind of stepping more fully into sort of our unique gifts, our real kind of unique intelligence that we all carry is for me is always what this invitation or this stepping in is around, and we need help to find that. And sometimes we have incidents in our lives which help us connect with that, and everything else in between. But I'm really curious about what it is that sort of leads us down these different pathways, and I think it's helpful to talk about them as well. So I was wondering whether just what were the sort of, if you wanted to give a bit of your backstory, a bit of the threads, maybe the things that have shaped this direction, this path that you're on, and the threads that you're holding, before we go into it.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really keen to make sure that this comes back around to how you framed this, which is, so mine is our story, but the sense of what could it be to find one's own. What inference am I making about how others who are listening to this might work towards their own? And I think there's a little bit of connective tissue at the end that I might miss. So if we don't make it there, help me.
Okay, I will.
Help me to remember. Okay, so my journey really starts in the same way many of my peers, I think, were experiencing the world, which is like self-preservation. Make sure you don't fuck it up. Get a job, get work, succeed, progress, all of that sort of stuff. That's the beginning of my story. And the elephant in the room with a conversation like that is, I am separate from you. I'm separate from everything else. There's competition. Ego carries me. Ego protects me, and so on. I followed a creative bent for a while. I was the theatre kid. I did a theatre degree at Dartington. One of the weirdest experiences anyone can go through, I'm sure. Took time to see the value in it. Let me put it that way. Flopped out of university, didn't really believe in theatre anymore. Actually, the subtext here is that I was so self-aware, so ego-driven, that being on a stage and inhabiting a character wasn't available to me because I was too aware of what my mates thought. I couldn't do it because I was too worried about my own image. So I went into the thing I can do is write. I've always been a writer. So I went into an ad agency. 10 years later, I was still in that world, working in marketing, helping with brand and development and that sort of thing, not knowing that all of these steps were going to feed into where I've ended up now. Yeah. And then really the moment for me, the real stepping off point was me and my wife had a son, and he was born with a profound brain disorder. He's 6 now, piles of blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, smiley little man, and non-verbal, non-mobile, prone to seizures, complex needs, so on and so on. So me and my wife are parent carers. And in the first 6 months of that experience, I came to a reckoning. I came to the frayed edge of my rationality. I came to recognize that logic and science wasn't going to get me through. It can put rockets into space, but it's devoid of meaning. I judged anyway at the time. And so I was so lost. So many platitudes, so many cups of tea, so many... even the doctors were saying things which didn't really, help or help us find meaning, at least. And then I heard a guy called Danny Deardorff, North American storyteller, died a few years ago, telling a story about a wolf at a crossroads. And it had more meaning in it for me than 6 months worth of anything else that anyone had said. And simultaneously, actually, one of the best pieces of advice I got, I remember, was go for a run. So I went for a run this day, and I went stomping out around the fields, and I disturbed a flock of jackdaws. And they lifted up into the air, and they left behind a pigeon with a broken wing. And that image unraveled me entirely, completely, down into my knees, bellowing. I sometimes take Strava with me when I go for a run. If I'd have had it that day, I never would have beaten what happened. The adrenaline and the unraveling and the stomping and furthest and fastest I've ever run in my life. And I came to realize 2 things. Firstly, that mythology, storytelling, that deeper work is so stuffed full of meaning. We've sidelined it and we've called it for kids. And when you hear Once Upon a Time, you back up and you think it's not for you, or there's someone at a festival, or there's someone at the back of a bookshop, or Pixar have got hold of it, or it's stuffed into Marvel. But there are very few contexts in which storytelling can be something that you can access as an adult to see yourself a bit more clearly. And I experienced it, and it helped me. And the other thing was, and we'll get to this, was recognizing that actually if an elder had been in my community, in my society, i.e. Someone not within my familial unit, they would have been the one that would have A, brought story to me, old stories, and B, given me the clear directive that image of the pigeon gave me, which is something like, I'm not going to tell you this is going to get better. I'm not going to tell you this is going to get worse. I'm not going to offer you a cup of tea. What I'm going to do is something that you don't want, but you desperately need, which is tell you this is happening to you. This is real, and you're experiencing it. And there aren't folks around me that have that nous, that way of being, that way of disconnecting their popularity from their opinion, which is what the Slavic wild witch of the woods does, which is what the elder does, and which is what I experienced in that time. So here's the connective tissue. I have remembered. Something within that experience, I've heard some reference to Manda Scott's work where she says that we used to be in an initiatory culture, right. Now we're a trauma culture. Yeah. That my initiation was via trauma, but it didn't need to be. What I needed, or need is a strange charged word, but what I could have experienced differently was moments of opening and willingness to be curious, to meet mythology and elderhood. I didn't have to have a trauma, I just had to have an opening. So my suggestion for this learning for me, and what I offer down to my children, what I offer to others in this work, is the willingness to be vulnerable and curious simultaneously is what would serve, not necessarily the trauma which gives access to that vulnerable curiosity.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And God, it brings up quite a lot. It makes me sometimes, like, because I think of, you know, even that view of the initiation culture. Sometimes I feel like, you know, life is initiating us all the time, or, you know, is offering us. And I hear that, you know, what would it look like to have those spaces open for us? And I wonder whether it's possible to not experience traumatic openings as well. And it's not something that maybe we need to debate. It just brings it up for me, because sometimes I feel that even thinking about modernity, you know, how it tries to sort of almost, I guess what I heard a little bit when you were saying about, you know, what that pigeon with the broken wing offered you. It's not good and it's not bad. I can't tell you, you know, all of the uncertainty that you were presented with, which is, again, is something that, you know, the moment that we're in, which is obviously unraveling, but even that, you know, to be okay with uncertainty, or to be encouraged to explore uncertainty, to learn to be comfortable with it, is at least in my experience, is completely lacking. I guess, yeah, it's making me think about, you know, there is initiation that we can, in some ways, you know, we try to sort of, I guess, through rites of passage, and we try to sort of think about moments in our journeys, in our development as humans, and how can we come around that. But also we are, you know, we are traumatized beings at this moment in time. Yeah. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it just brought up that that's all connected for me.
There's this wonderful book by a woman called Sandra Ingerman, the Book of Ceremony, and she has in that, well, one of the things she says, this is a complete aside, but is something like, if you weren't handed ceremonies, don't go looking to steal others.
Right.
Just make them up.
Right.
Just make them up.
Yeah.
Rule number one, just, you know, a ceremony in my book is just us all agreeing that it means something.
Yeah.
That's all we got to do for a ceremony to be. But beautiful simplicity in that idea. But she says, there's this one phrase in the book, which is, your wind, the wind is your ally. Just a sentence in a passage, and it just smacked me between the eyes. Had to close the book and so on. And it's something like, I believe we'll never truly see ourselves. We'll never really understand who we are or see ourselves that clearly, I don't think. But like the wind, we can see the way we impact ourselves on others. You don't see the wind, you see the trees moving because of the wind. You see the waves being made because of the wind. And there's something about, in those moments of trauma, in that moment of deep vulnerability, if that's the moment we access our curiosity, that's where I think the opportunity is. I think you're right. I have a friend who says there's a difference between we've conflated comfort and a complete lack of discomfort.
Right.
You and I are having this is a really, you know, enjoyable situation. It's not completely devoid of, you know, there's smoke in the eyes. You might hear the nose going a little bit and so on, and you know, we don't have a thermostat and double glazing here, but but there's something here, and part of what I'm also suggesting is that I think one of the key tenets of initiation of rite of passage is that you shouldn't know that you're completely safe.
Right.
So it's emulating that trauma. Right. I don't know that I'm going to be okay here. So what I'm suggesting is if you're having a moment in your life which is, I don't know if I'm going to be okay, that's the moment to be curious and open and listen.
There are two stories on Spaceship Earth, a passenger story and a crew story. The passenger story is based on extraction, transaction and distraction, and it's leading us towards collapse. The crew story is based on connection, cooperation and participation. It leads towards regeneration.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
I guess what you're gesturing towards a little bit with the with elders, which we're obviously going to dig into, but is, it's like you had that experience, right? You witnessed those birds, you witnessed that pigeon, and that opened up a curiosity for you. But if you'd had, I think that's exactly, because that's what I'm starting to get curious about, and myself becoming elder, and how I'm interacting with younger, and I'm noticing that when incidents are happening, when traumatic things are happening, how can I help in a way that isn't about trying to sort of solve that, but what can I help that person become curious about? What could I maybe just help them see, perhaps, that they might not be seeing immediately? Yeah. And it's just, as you're talking, it's a beautiful thought, because it's like, and we'll get into the whole eldership piece that you're really delving into, but it's a lovely active practice for everyone, right? That's the thing, right?
How can I be of service?
How can
I be of service in this moment?
Yeah, right. So I wondered if you might, for our listeners, just speak a bit to myth in terms of where we're speaking from when we're speaking of myth. And of course, that's how you're experiencing it, but I think it's helpful because we know, again, it's a language that is, or a term that has a lot of myth around it. It's used in many different ways. We live in a reality, I would argue, a modernity that sort of believes that there is an objective reality. There's one way of knowing the world, and everything else is kind of, every other way is sort of like seen as not real. And I would, I would see the way that myth is used in that context. You'll watch how people will, comment and go, "Oh, shit, it's just a myth you're talking about." It's a sense of not being true. And you might argue I feel like we're living in mythic times almost daily at the moment, where things happen that are so, impossible to get your head around. I wondered whether we could just sort of prepare the ground a little bit, because we're going to be speaking a lot to that.
Yeah. Thank you. So, as you're speaking, my body is vibrating. I'm just thinking, like, how do you? There are 1,000 ways to answer this question, and rather than try and do one, what I'm going to do is just plant lots of seeds. So
brilliant.
This here is this what I'm about to say, which is a quote from Bruce Lee. What I'm about to say, this is for the, let's say, statistically, there's 1 in 100 listening to this who've just heard you frame that and are ready to disbelieve entirely and say, whatever is about to be said, I'm out. This is not academic enough. It's not scientific enough. I believe in a priori fact. There is truth. Here's what I have to offer. Bruce Lee said, I'm not going to be able to get this bang on, unfortunately. That's but fine. The quote is something like, accept what is useful, discard what is not, and add what is uniquely your own. Something like that. So whatever's coming up for you, can you say that again? Accept what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own. So whatever comes now, whatever I suggest now, I'm going to just do a list of things. If it doesn't jive with you, just let it go. That's okay. Here we go. So first, this comes directly from Martin Shaw, Dr. Martin Shaw, who I spent a bit of time with. Glad to have found him. He's a big chunk of the crossroads moments I've experienced in my life. He talks about kenning. This idea, kind of Gaelic, Scottish idea. So ken, to know, adena ken, I don't know. But giving something names, multiple names for something. So a horse is a really good example. You might call it a horse, you might call it equine, and then you might start running out of phrases that you have for it. So reaching for something which just bubbles up through you, like four-legged sky stand underer, or apple from children receiver, something like that. Some descriptor around
hairy
a verb.
Big noser.
Yeah, exactly. And trying to get to 12 is the game. And I've done this with pals with the ferry from Plymouth, trying to ken that. And there's something about how myth is having another go at naming. So that's another way of putting it. One way I've heard of putting it is a myth is something that always is and never was. I think there's something about for someone who straddles the rational and the animistic, for someone who I pride myself on being on that threshold of being able to, if you ask me where I am in the relationship between passenger and crew, it's, how do they meet each other? Where do they meet? Do they cook together? How do they have conversations? I'm really fascinated with that thresholding, and I think the access point in for somebody who's based their life on sense, and I mean that in terms of does this make sense? Do I understand this? Can I touch, taste, smell it, etc.? Mythology is almost devoid of sense, but it's absolutely full of meaning. So particularly for people who have experienced success, proof of concept, repeating the same experiment over and over again and having repeatedly good results, for those people who have had something make sense all their life and are starting to have this niggling feeling that there's something else, mythology plays in the space of meaning. And one of the other things I would say is, I'm talking about old stories. There's something about new stories which are becoming less trustworthy by the day. Filtered artificial intelligence, whatever desires or machinations somebody has on it, GDP, the way that we report on things, finances, and so on and so on. Old stories have been filtered like mineral water through mountain rock to the point where we end up with this deeply nourishing source that we can drink from. I'm saying all of this almost apologetically because what I think about mythology is that it used to be a way that we made sense of the world. It used to be actually something that kept us in check. We used to recognize the deities that were our waterways. Almost all old river names are either taboo, you can't say them anymore, so they get turned into modern names, which means rocky or full of fish, or they're about goddesses. Because water and our source of water used to be so hard to talk about, but because it was so gorgeous to us, that you could argue that mythology is an old mechanism that used to keep us in check. We recognize the deity of the world and the wonder of the world. We tell stories about it to the point where it's hard to talk about. So then we can't overfish, and we can't, just go through entire landscapes for the benefit of a new way of working and a new scientific method. So I'd also suggest that mythology is something of an ancient technology which kept us in balance with the natural world.
Beautiful, I love that.
And so on and so on and so on. So there are some efforts at kenning what myth is.
I like that, kenning myth. I remember doing some kenning down. I've got some scribbles somewhere. I remember trying to kenning a buttercup. It's like sun catchers, yellow wobblers, golden fairies, shiny crowns, hovering yellow hats, 5 golds, royal fairies, yellow ladies, nodding sunheads, quivering golden regals, floating crowns, sun caps, goldie bowls. No, that's it. I love that. There was something you said. Simultaneously, we are at the threshold of a world of not knowing. The technology already exists to create videos indistinguishable from real life. Many of us are conversing with AI every day without knowing about it. What we know to be true, particularly through the digital lens, has never been more shrouded in doubt. And I love that because I guess this is a little bit more on the exploring the mythic ground in these times. And I've been thinking this a lot, like, what is it? What is true? What is real? We had Jay Griffiths came and did something on sort of exploration of story. I think called The Remix did a few years ago, and she came with this provocation around sort of true and real. Like things can be real, but are they actually true? The idea of building a civilization on a living Earth, it's real, but is it true? And we are in this time where this this kind of objective reality of modernity increasingly, I think more people are becoming more curious, let's say, of what's actually sits underneath that claim of this is, we know this to be real. What I sense a lot is people are really struggling because they don't know what's rooting them. They don't know what to root with. And where do you go for truth? Where do you go for truth in a world we live in, a post-truth culture where powerful people just lie? It's very discombobulating.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yes,
trying to find where is my truth, I guess.
Yeah.
And which is why what you're working with is so interesting and necessary, I would argue. And at least the other thing I think for me that comes up with, which I think you're speaking to, I'm very intrigued with myth and the places we're in, right? Because we are all in these places, which many of us have kind of forgotten about in this kind of story of progress and globalization, and everything's in the future, and we're just sort of many of us have forgotten that we're in these kind of places, and I guess the stories of those places have been forgotten, and like you say, maybe they've been wiped out and pushed away because they break that idea of responsibility to places. And but I'm fascinated by the stories of the places, and I think you said at the start, like, if we can't find them through our elders, surely we can just start finding them ourselves.
I surround myself with storytellers.
Yeah. And
one of it seems to be there's a kind of pattern of development that one goes through as a storyteller, and there's all sorts of stuff hooked up in that. There's, am I good at it, and am I doing anything useful, and all that sort of business, and
imposter syndrome.
And what you spoke to right at the start, actually, of everybody's doing many things. Storytelling for me, there have been moments where I'm doing it and I'm in the middle of it, and there's a group of people, and I'm thinking, I kind of lift up out of myself and I look down and I think, is this it? Is this it? Am I calling this my life's work? Is this really what I do? Is this who I am? And of course, in many ways, no, it's not who I am. It's not all I do, and so on. But in other ways, having fidelity to it is where I started to get real joy, and just continually trying. And I've noticed this part of the experience of staying with it is starting to notice the kind of the spiral going up, kind of going through similar territory again. And one of those territories that I've experienced and with other storytellers is, where is this story from? I know this version of it, but where's it from? Yeah, I'm working with King Arthur. Forget it. Forget getting the original version of King Arthur. We're talking about stuff that's in the ancient Welsh text, the Mabinogion, the reports from kind of the 5th century warband leader, a guy called Arthur, maybe, who knows. And all preceding that is, before the written word, is this whole oral tradition. We're never going to get to what the actual source is. And so there is a little bit of a fetishizing, I think, of you can't kind of stand in the truth of something until you know exactly where it comes from, exactly where its roots were, but where did it begin? Who was the first person to tell it? And they're palimpsestic. They overlap on top of each other, all of these stories. I remember talking to so I'm part of a community called the Fifth Direction, which is the kind of the mythopoetic centre of Eastern Australia. A guy called Asher Packman, brilliant guy, and they're all, by the way, offshoots from the mythopoetic men's movement, which is another conversation, but started in Minnesota after the Vietnam War. And so we've got this filtering down, and he was telling me this story about this is an Aboriginal story about a deity that ends up turning into a river. There's a story about the river that separates Cornwall and Devon, which is almost exactly the same. If you know the story of the Tamar, the story of the kind of the earth spirit, the Pisky, if you like, the knocker, the underground one, who comes up onto the top of the ground and by hook and by crook ends up being turned by her father into this crystalline, beautiful deity that fades away to the south coast. The Tamara, she's called. It's the same as the Aboriginal story. Now, are we talking about some great Jungian shared unconscious? Are we talking about something that's in the human psyche, or are we talking about some kind of coming to terms with life as it is? And so I do think that, There are people out there who have this ability, this glorious ability, to put their face down on the soil and come back up with a myth. And it's where they come from, man. It's we know how to hunt prey animals, but how do we be in that? They have eyes like us, they bleed like us, they leave behind young like us, and we're going to kill them in order to feed our family. How can we be in that dichotomy of the human expression? And I think that's the beginning of myth. So we talk about the dear God and the great one beyond, and we put it into the ground with its whatever it needs to go on to the next life. And so, yeah, there is something about honouring the old stories. I think there's a real difference between old stories and new stories. It's just my preference. It's my truck. It's not what I suggest I prescribe. But I also think you're right. I think there is something of just seeing what comes when you make enough space to see what happens and start saying words and see how they unravel and see how similar they are to ancient Aboriginal myths when they come out of your mouth.
I often sense that, again, maybe it's the stepping in thing. I'm doing a lot of work here. We have this project, We Are Avon, this river project, and I was speaking to a guest on the podcast, Shread, who from India, who's working with what she calls earthy governance, an ancient yet modern blend of radical democracy between humans and a more than human community, the earth community of a place.
Yeah.
And she was talking about pilgrimaging along the river as a really wonderful, easy first step to bring people back into relationship, just the walking the river. And then the storying, we were talking, she was talking about trying to sort of to how do we carry these stories again? And some of those can be found from, she was speaking to there are still some, indigenous cultures and elders, and there's that ability to pass those stories on. But there's also a bit about, we need to start carrying stories again, so that the generations down the line, right, are gonna, it's got to start. So they always say to people, like, if we can't find the old story, we can begin, if we begin to listen and observe and notice, we can begin to carry some new stories.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you don't have to be. This is the thing. And I was being an apologist at the start of this, and I have a sense that that's part of my journey. But there's something about firstly, pretending well enough, I think, is directly hooked up to the elderhood conversation. Those would-be elders of today weren't raised with elders in the model. Right. So how can they fully embody it? How can they? How they don't have the conditioning of a child. So, but they can pretend well enough. Right. So the kids that are alive today can see a model, so they can pretend a bit better. So then we have this multi-generational response to this multi-generational wounding. And I also think that, and the apologist bit is, storytelling is naff, really naff, and silly, and why should I? And I would love to go to the square mile and see how many people I could stop who were rushing to get another really great bit of business secured to hear an old story and see how it might change. Because at least my experience of it beforehand is that it's just a bit silly. It's like, poetry at least has its kind of has its place. Oil painting. Tolkien talks about this. He says that nursery stories became nursery stories because the salt of the earth people that were carrying them took them into the nurseries to tell the children, whilst their parents were more interested, we're talking about class divides here, were more interested in higher arts. They were going out to find other things. So stories started falling away and becoming a bit naff, a bit silly, a bit for children. And the kind of, because it's so powerful, and because I'm an ambassador for it, of course I'm going to speak in these terms, but I see something just utterly extraordinary for someone who was rational, didn't have to change who I was. You don't have to be a someone to hear a story. You don't have to ascribe to something to hear a story. So if someone can get past that barrier, that membrane of this all sounds a bit silly, beyond is this whole landscape of beauty and glory, and it's as simple as just having a go once. And I would also say that part of what I do, this is you're going to hear the more cynical side of me now, but part of what I'm playing with is actually there's a lot of storytelling out there which is actually still about the person. Right. Someone someone blessed our group recently by saying that we deal more in folk music than in pop music.
Mm-hmm.
Pop music's about the singer, folk music's about the music. There is a lot of storytelling out there which is about the person.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a one-person theatre show. I would suggest, if you're interested in story, if you're walking a river, if you want to carry stories, the number one kind of directive that I would be interested in working with is getting out of the way of the story. Doing everything you can not to theatricalize it. And of course, sometimes you're going to want to jump up and stamp your feet and make a bawdy joke and so on. But the second you start putting the cello on the beat of exactly that moment in the story and expanding your wingspan and speaking in a poetry voice and calling the moon down, that's wonderful and theatrical and has something to it. But I don't think it's what the essence of storytelling could be back in the hands of the people, which is just tell the story. That's it. Nothing more needed.
Beautiful. I mean, I feel lucky in that I have the wonderful Mark Sears in my sort of close gang, who I think is coming from a similar sort of lineage
glorious
to you.
bloke.
And Mark has, he's offered up, when I'm listening to him, I'm like, I'm with you, because I've witnessed him offering up story, and just how, and watching how that impacts people, who might be not bumping into stories that often of a myth, and seeing what it can do and what it can open up in people, and space that it can open up that other things we struggle with. So I see it as a sort of like a real opening.
And we're talking about mythology and oral storytelling simultaneously, but just to put a really fine point on it, I think we're in similar territory here, but there is one version of oral storytelling which is alive and kicking, and we all know how powerful it is, because when we've gone to see it done well, it's been either one of the best things that's happened in that time period, or one of the most confirming things, or one of the most challenging things. Stand-up comedians, they're doing it. Billy Connolly's one of the greatest oral storytellers I've ever seen. He just gets up and lets his mouth run, and it's amazing. And he's not, So that's it. There's something about. Simultaneously, for my money, it's one of the most glorious, powerful, genius, opening, insightful things there is, and it's low-hanging fruit. It doesn't have to be aggrandized. It can just be. I heard this story once. You up for hearing it? Off you go.
Exactly. I love that. So I've seen. So there's two phrases I'm seeing you. So one is ancient clarity. And the other one is to be myth-informed. And I wondered whether you could just speak to that a little bit, and then we can move into eldership.
Okay. So, let me start with myth-informed, because it's going to unravel less. I'll be able to get this done more quickly.
Go wherever you want.
With my most sincere apologies to listeners here, we are two unravelers. And it will. The want is to unravel.
It's all right. Most people who come to this podcast, they're open to rambling.
We're all ravelling. Great.
I've actually now said that rambling is a social technology that I believe is very, very needed for these times.
Maybe that
gets us out of like having a very sort of clean agenda and flow. Not sure how helpful that can be in this time where rambling opens up. So anyway, sorry, I'm just encouraging the ramble.
Maybe that's there's something here about the difference between co-creation and collaboration, right? If you go into an organization and you've got your title and your job role, you're collaborating towards a predefined goal. If you're all rambling, you're co-creating. The way your grandma made cakes and the way you walk your dog is as relevant to the conversation as whatever your job title is.
It is. And there was a very wise woman from Kenya that I was speaking to recently, and she was telling me, because I was kind of apologizing for my rambling, and she's like, this is what we do. This is what our people do. We sit and we ramble, and that's how we co-create a different type of knowing between us. We ramble for hours. I was like, okay, so I'm not completely mad. Anyway, let's get back to
okay.
ancient clarity
and myth-informed. So really, actually, without kind of hawking my wares, that's what I kind of that's what I'm interested in doing business in. Whether I'm engaging in organizations directly or something that's more campaigny and movements based or coaching, these are the two ideas that I offer. These are my wares. And I think myth-informed, the best example I can give you is, so I've started working with Plant One, Carl Rowlinson. You might have seen him knocking about. He shows up at events with a with a sapling and planting trees all over the southwest and bringing back temperate rainforests, working with Kabila, working with a guy called Sam Manning from the Woodland Trust. And they've got this project. We are working on this project at the moment called No Trees, No Seas, which is looking at the world in a way that Sam describes as flowscapes.
Right.
There's this ancient Japanese proverb that he found, which is, if you want to catch a fish, plant a tree. Recognizing if you take the phrase nutrient cycling, the way that rivers, if you box in a river in the way we love to do in cities, you can't really get much nutrient cycling going on. But if you let the trees fall into it and the bugs fall into it and the fecundity of the forest go down out to the sea, you see how it impacts the phytoplankton, the building blocks of life itself, and so on. And if you look at salmon, then as they go out and come back in again, then talking about geographies and counties and all of these human boundaries doesn't really make much sense. And even conservation efforts, if you're looking at different individual species, if you could be having a conversation which is about the flowscape you're all a part of. So they came to me and they asked what it would be to have that project be myth-informed. And so a part of my job is holding space. Part of my job is telling stories, but a big chunk of my job is research, going back, reading stuff, listening to other storytellers, going out and finding out what's out there. And the bottom line of what's happening in this project is, well, there's a film, there's going to be some inference to what the old stories were. The wind's really kicking up now.
I love it.
Yeah. Let's go. This is the flowscape. Wow.
You don't get this on Zoom. No.
And the bottom line of what my research trail uncovered was the word belonging. To be myth-informed is to be closer to belonging. Is to half the stories that we're swimming in today, we know the names of, but we don't know the story. We haven't heard the story itself. We know that our culture at the moment is smack bang in the middle of its time of fountain of youth. Don't get old. Stay as young as you can for as long as possible. When you retire, you're irrelevant. So on, so on, so on. Youth serums, look healthy, stay young, work out. All these ideas that aging is a decline, which is what we're going to get to. That's a fountain of youth story. But we don't know the fountain of youth story. So part of the process of being myth-informed is some curiosity around the myths that you are in and being more explicitly engaging with them. So part of what's happening with that project is, if salmon is one of the headlines of nutrient cycling, what's the myth of salmon? It turns out that the daubed cave paintings of salmon are 20,000 years old. We've been talking about salmon in British mythology for thousands of years. So that's a sense of what myth-informed might be, I suppose. If you're trained in your job, if you know about health and safety, if you know about safeguarding, if you know about how to lift up boxes without hurting your back, it's another element of how we might move in the world in a way that keeps our soul intact.
I love that, because it's also just I'm thinking about the projects here, the bioregional project we have, We Are Avon, and just that idea of being myth. We were talking about this the other night, trying to sort of we've got this guardianship project, and the first thing we're trying to encourage ourselves to do is to come home to this place, is to really notice and understand and observe, but that idea of becoming myth-informed is that's an interesting thread that we might want to open up, because bioregion is it's inherently of the place. That's what we're moving towards, and there's quite a lot of energy going into that. It feels like actually it's a way of being in these times that feels like there's a lot of interest. But the idea of weaving that, or having that myth-informed foundation, that's a really beautiful thought.
And so down to go up, so within, so without, so on. The more I think work that sort of project can do of connecting to belonging to place, right, increases the belonging to self.
That's it.
Not that self is a complete idea, but this is pure Martin Shaw, the stuff that he was just drumming over and over again, which is, when you hear a story, for example, if you hear a story about a mother of 3 daughters, and you're a mother of 3 daughters yourself, it's hard work not to see yourself as that mother, reflected in everything that happens there. But part of the flipping of that is putting the whole thing in your body. Where's the mother? Where are the three daughters? Where's the wild hag? Where's the wolf? Where's the bridge across the river? Where's the lake at the bottom of the mountain reflecting the moon? You know, that they're all in my body somewhere. So there's this ability to do this kind of, if you hear a story of a play, you hear the story of Tamara, this beautiful earth deity that gets turned into a river by her father. Okay, something's happened there. There's some fracture between daughter and father. Is there a part of me which is daughter? Is a part of me which is father? And how are they speaking to each other? And this kind of inner cosmology starts lining up, and being myth-informed, I think, is a campaign-level, geographical, land-based, world-based, universe-based thing. And it's also a representation that it's all just the same spiral all the way up and all the way down. And it's a way of getting closer to who you are in this time of just abject confusion and seeking for purpose. It's a real sense of being at home just as you are.
I don't know why it's making me think of spiders, because I've been talking at the moment with I'm involved in a project, and we've been looking at spiders because I think they've survived, I think, 5 mass extinctions or something. But this whole bit about, you know, spiders living in their bodies, that you were just speaking about, and obviously they're spinning web from their body, and then they're engaging with the web of life, so to speak, through the web, so through their body. So everything is through the body. That's their whole experience is through the body. Which, just as you were speaking about where that myth is, or where that story is showing up for you. Yeah. It's just interesting to back into our bodies, and then this whole, you know, this, you know, at least my understanding, doing some work with some indigenous cultures are talking about, you know, body is land, so land is body. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no separation. Yeah. And all of these things again, which I guess have, you know, all very ancient, you know, you talk about that, but you know, ancient ways. And actually I think they're all, sometimes they're sort of kind of all kind of indicating or orienting back into the body, back into the whole, back into the sort of, you know? And also I think there's some, do you know, you had the name Ken Wilber? Yeah. So Ken Wilber has this phrase, transcend and include. So there's a danger of looking back at kind of using the word ancient, and then nostalgia takes over, and before you know what's going on, your iPhone's the worst thing you've ever had. You know, like that. Oh, couldn't we go back to? And there's something about a kind of that idea of transcending and including. What's back there? Yeah. What's in our history that we can include and welcome back, but also not just wholesale go back to. We can also transcend it. It can also be a new way. Yeah. But it's mad, isn't it? Because if you think about it, you know, we're using ancient parts of the earth to create these insanely mad technologies of modernity. Do you know what I mean? Like all of these things that have been created through ancient processes, and you know, miraculous events that we now sort of dig up and use to produce. You know, so it's that sort of binariness. It's just like knowing that actually, that even that idea of time and what is new and what is old, and you know what I mean? Because all of that is kind of, when you sort of really start to lift the lid, you go, well, it's all merging and connecting. And so much to say there, but let me catch ancient clarity just because this is a really lovely no, I'm gonna go there with you. This is the problem that we've got. It's just unfolding on itself, but I'm gonna try and manage myself a bit, because otherwise we're gonna be here for 3 weeks. Great. Okay. So ancient clarity is the center of it is wisdom. The center of it is wisdom. I've already said this even in this conversation, but wisdom is not learning something new. It's being reminded of what you've always known. Oh, what a relief. What a relief. You look down at the children who are these just beautiful channels of whatever the thing is, the all that is. And the older folks who are about to pass beyond, who share their life regrets and look back at moments of joy, and both of them are closest to source in their way, and both of them have this ability or kind of forced by their circumstances to remember what they know to be most deeply true.
those who are just born and those who are about to die are the ones most well equipped to be able to focus on what matters most and to remember it most cleanly. Learning something new is the story of the day. I'm fascinated by learning something new. I love learning new things, but being reminded that wisdom is going back to what I've always known, what my child self knew, what my body knows, what my bones know. That's the center of ancient clarity. And so the offering of wisdom is to go looking for sources of things that you've always known. That's time in extended time in nature, in big sky nature, time in community around a fire. That's speaking to grief. That's mythology. That's elderhood. These are all simultaneous ideas. But there's a circle. There's a circle, which is obviously a spiral because we change. Which is ancient clarity is peace, wisdom, and courage. Peace, wisdom, and courage. Peace, which is relaxing and observing. Wisdom, which is remembering what you've always known. Courage, which is making an attempt. And the three are in relation with each other and they feed each other. And the beautiful thing about this let's call it a model for the time being. I don't really know what this is, but is that there are signposts to each one. And they seem to be perennial challenges. This has all come up through mythology to meet me in the journey of trying to put things into models so I can translate them and work with them in, leadership and coaching and so on. And it's completely needs work and is incomplete. But let me have a go at this. Overthinking, overwhelm, not feeling good enough seem to be three of the perennial challenges of the human condition. These are in stories that go back thousands of years. Overthinking, overwhelm, not feeling good enough. And they each point to the need of those three things within ancient clarity. Overthinking is a signpost that you're seeking for peace. If you're overthinking, what happens if you allow yourself to relax and observe? Overwhelm is a sign that you're seeking for wisdom. So if you're feeling too much information coming in, if you've been on a learning hype, what happens if you seek to remember what you've always known? And not feeling good enough, which is, and I've said this recently, and this kind of new clarity for me, which is that overthinking and overwhelm seem to be these big signposts. I'm overthinking, I'm overwhelmed seem to be big signposts. Feeling not good enough seems to be much more insidious. It's a little signpost that you see 1,000 times a day, not one big one. It's not a pervasive thought of I'm not good enough, because if you didn't feel good enough, you wouldn't get up in the morning. Maybe. But those little micro moments of, oh God, did I say that wrong? Have I pissed that person off? Am I destroying the world? Should I not be driving this car? Those moments of not feeling good enough. And they seem to me to be pointing to that challenge of making an attempt. Moving away from people pleasing, moving away from am I doing this well enough, and just trying. And they talk to each other. So if you're anywhere in that map, in that model, overthinking, overwhelmed, not feeling good enough, consider it maybe a signpost that might be pointing to peace, wisdom, and courage as something that might sustain you, and that they speak to each other. And the central spinning hub for me is access points to all three is mythology. Just seems to be a place to go.
We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. How bonkers is that? You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast. If you'd like to support the running of the Spaceship Earth podcast, head over to our Substack and sign up. You'll get every episode straight to your inbox, weekly writing, plus other crew offerings. We're grateful for whatever you can give. Join us at becomingcrew.substack.com.
Wow. There's a lot in that. I love that. Yeah. I love that. And I was just thinking as you're talking, because I'm like, God, why am I so overwhelmed at the moment? Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's also as I'm listening, I'm like about that, it's making me, my body's like, well, it's wanting stillness. It's wanting to be.
Yeah.
I was talking this morning actually about, someone was talking about, being in a waiting room. like what's it like to be in a waiting room?
Yeah.
And but you know, just we talked about this on the last episode, just about space to just be, which is pretty hard for most of us to just find that space to just be. That's why we find when we bring people here on the land, I think that's why we all burst into tears pretty quickly when we go out on the land, because it's like, you know what I mean? Because actually there's a that overwhelm, whatever it is, the overthinking, overwhelm, when you actually create that space to maybe temper it, or pay attention to the fact that that you don't need to, you ease off. But I think this spaciousness, because that also is, when you talk of wisdom, I think wisdom. I always feel wisdom comes from, observation. Sort of a space, sort of, feeling, sitting, contemplating.
Yes.
It has a sort of real sort of it needs space. Wisdom. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's something again that the modernity doesn't encourage us to take space and contemplate and fill it. And of course then we've got all these other things that are kind of pulling us into making that even kind of more challenging to contemplate. No, that's thank you for sharing that. That's I think that will be quite a useful offering for folks. So I want to get into eldership and the work that you're doing. And I was trying to remember actually, because I think we bumped up. We had a little. I think I stumbled across something you were doing last year or something around this eldership thing. I mean, you've got this re-eldering manifesto, which we'll get to. But I think it's interesting personally. It's interesting on many fronts. I've been asking myself this question, I think, for the last few years. Like, I remember asking myself, like, where are my elders? And at least feeling that I didn't have any, apart from, like, there are many oaks that have become my elders over the years, but they're more than human. And then as I am becoming older, and I feel I'm becoming elder, and I know there's a difference here. So it's very live for me. And what does it even mean to become elder? And I'm still, trying to find my elders as well. I have recently found one who's supporting me, or at least in dialogue with me, which is really helpful. But you had this again, something you wrote, which I thought was beautiful. You said, your contribution is to foster communities in which the youngers of future generations, your own children included, can be raised alongside the elders you suffered without. Which I thought was beautiful. So I guess I don't know how we want to start this, but perhaps, I want to get into the re-eldering manifesto because it's awesome. But maybe how did this eldership portal open? And just tell us about what's going on with it.
How did the portal open? Great question. I mean, I'm hearing the same in you. There's something interior that happens. Like, something's happening with me. There are people younger than me that are. I sometimes recognise opportunities that I could have done more with. I could have been better for them in a society that I judge is strange and nebulous and scary and heavy, and as well as the beautiful things. I could have been of greater service there. Ooh, what was that? What just happened? Just interacted with some younger people. I could have done better there. There's something there. The moment I described earlier was the first moment of kind of opening. The two things that are really clear to me are, first is, so I'm part of, as I said, this community, A Band of Brothers, where we work with 18 to 25-year-old men who are at risk of the criminal justice system, already involved. And the foundational idea there is that they haven't had good male role models. So we mentor. It's a mentoring charity, and a big chunk of it is rites of passage, and it again is flows out of the mythopoetic men's movement. And there might be more to say there to contextualize it, but there are elders in that community, and they play with the idea of what does it mean to be an elder. So I was exposed to it there. This community of people who are trying, because they're not. We aren't a community. We're not taking care of each other's bread. We don't take each other's rubbish out. We meet once a week, but we're volunteers in a charity. So it's a symbolic community in a sense. But we're playing with the idea of elders and getting to see the idea of somebody who has done their work. That's the phrase that comes up. Someone who's done their work, who can stand up and say, I know my gold and I know my shadow. I know what I'm fantastic at. Without self-aggrandizing, I know my power and I know where I need help. So I've seen it there. And then the other thing is the stories themselves. Holy shit. The amount of times when there's a character in a story or a being in a story that gets into this mode of finally asking for help, finally saying, oh, fucking hell, what I need is support, obviously. And I've been trying to do it on my own for the last 2 weeks, 10 years, all my life, whatever it is. The moment they ask for support is when a little old woman walks out of an oak tree. Is when an old fella appears, with his whatever. I just saw this character repeating in the motifs of mythology, of fairy tale, of wonder tale, of an older, tiny, wrinkled, grey-haired thing saying, oh, you've asked for help. Okay, here we are. I'm going to tell you something now. And inevitably, it's something that the character hasn't been looking for. They've been looking for the gold. They've been looking for the firebird. They've been looking for the princess, the prince, the snake to take the scales away from, whatever it is they're after. And what the elder in the stories gives them is something that they don't want, but they really need it. They really need it. And so that those two things kind of happening in tandem, what I recognized was that the old stories and elders they're just different words for the same thing. Elders carry stories, they speak in story terms, they disassociate their popularity from their opinion. By the way, so do myths. Old stories don't give a shit what you think about them, whereas modern stories really do. How many votes, how many likes, how much money are you going to give me for this story? Old stories don't care about that. They're not there for that. They're there to be, not for your vote, not for your opinion, not for your side to choose. So yeah, that's the and then the simultaneous recognition of that moment with the bird and my boy, and just kind of casting about and recognizing that my parents were in the armed forces, moved around a lot. We don't really didn't have at the time kind of friends outside the family that were older, uncle kind of type characters, and so yeah, I recognize a chunk of the folks who might have offered me a positive role modeling and something that isn't hooked up to the parental. All the shit that we've got with our parents going on, it was missing, and it hurts, really hurts that wasn't there. That's my main driver, is I want to create a world where my kids have it.
Oh God, there's a lot in this whole inquiry, right? Because my mind jumps around. I'm thinking I'm thinking as you're speaking, obviously, that whole thing, we've all grown, many of us have grown up without, being kind of forced to solve everything ourselves, or if we're with a partner, it's like, you have to kind of perform all of these functions, you have to be a good partner, you have to be a good parent, you have to have a professional role, you have to sort of earn money, you have to kind of have friendships, you have to have all of these things. And invariably when shit hits the fan, which which it does,
Yeah.
because it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
You know, you're in many ways. There's a sense that you've got to try and solve it all yourself as well,
Yeah.
right? That's how I have sort of seen things, and I see. You know, I can't remember. You know, the day I was thinking about. I was in this conversation. I'm talking about marriages that were falling apart, right? And there's even a question there, like, then you see people like, got lawyers involved, to sort of sort things out, and you're like, how did we get to that, right? Because I'm saying, well, imagine if you were in a, perhaps the, part of being in a, living in community, perhaps there were all these other characters that might have been able to kind of help, again, like, spotting things, right? It's that little thing, spotting the thing and maybe just showing you another way of considering what's going on. But because we don't have any of that, we're sort of all finding we've got to solve these problems, we've got to have people that can solve them for us, and I don't know, that's all coming up. I'm not saying that is eldership, but it's this breakdown in this this human community of others around us.
I agree. I really strongly agree.
And then you've got this bit, which I know is part of this work about, at least in this culture, in this country that we're in, of retirement and being old and what that means. And you got this beautiful line which I loved bringing up, which was where was it? It was about like retirement in the meta crisis, or retirement in climate breakdown, or something like that. I can't remember where it was, but it made me giggle because it makes me think. I still hear people in my of my age, talking about sometimes like retirement and what they're going to do and stuff, and I'm like, are you completely mad? I mean, just even the context that we're going to be in, the idea of sort of traveling around the world as the whole place is burning and at war. But anyway, sorry.
I think the line, which is said with love, because one of the biggest fears at going into retirement is a loss of purpose. So I really, really do say this with love, which is you cannot retire from the meta crisis.
That was it. That was the line. Exactly.
With love.
No, I get exactly that. It's exactly that, right? Because we've got to bring compassion into this, right? It's because it is, it's the stories we've been following, right, are they're expiring. It's obvious. And yet it's hard for many of us who are quite a way down that story to figure out, well, what am I supposed to be, what else do I do, right? Or what is it that I'm...
thank you for saying it. Thank you for that being allowed to be okay to say.
Yeah,
the people who are my age, let's say people are, like I say, knocking on the door of 40, considering retirement. Okay. It's just let's just consider how fast things are changing. How possible might that even be?
Right.
Yeah. Just to like that, it's a gavel drop.
Yeah.
And it needs to be said, and it's relaxing.
Well, that's it. I always think the more we speak to this stuff, the more we bring it out, the more we can explore it, the more we can start to see, actually, it's a bit of an absurd idea, really.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, what else can come through? So let's get into this, right? The re-eldering manifesto, right? Because you have this line, refirement, not retirement, which I love. However you want to do this, but I just feel like it'd be good to sort of try and unpack it for the listeners, and what it's trying to do, what's at the kind of the heart of it, and what's the intention, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And this is a process of kenning again. You called it earlier a thing, and I thought that's what it is. It's a thing. I don't know what it is yet, but it's a something.
It's definitely alive.
It's definitely, exactly. And then you've just said the current name of it, which an ally of mine has strongly suggested I change because others are already using that phraseology. So it might not even be called this by the time anyone is listening to this.
Current form.
Its current form. And that really speaks to what this whole thing is about, which is that it's my own work around working out in public. Doing the work where other people can see it being done. Out in the open is a phrase I heard somebody use. So it's unfinished. It's full of holes. It's incomplete, and that's why I'm doing it. Is for people to challenge and come in, and so I want to pick up one of the points you made a minute ago by way of segueing into this, which is when we are living in communities where we're separate and we don't have people outside of our, the old 2.4 children setup, which is really efficient, and we get to heat our homes and we have a house and we can sleep quietly and privately and all, Daniel Schmachtenberger, if you haven't come across him, whoever's listening to this, extraordinary mind, talks about externalizing the negatives and internalizing the positives, where our systems are set up that for a select few, they get to keep the good stuff in, but then everyone as a broader society pays the price for the negatives. And 2.4 children's a great example of, that for those of us who want to have a consistent heating and flowing water and comfort and the luxuries of modernity, great. But the external challenges for that are that we've lost this sense of community. We don't have people in our pockets who can speak to us as family members without being direct family members. And here's the kicker. If your mum says to you, "You're a fantastic singer," part of the internal monologue is, well, of course you'd say that, you're my mum. So there's something about someone who isn't your mum or dad, with all the hang-ups of what it is for them to have been your primary caregiver, whose primary goal is for you to not get unhealthy and not to die, and so on, is we've had to name ourselves. Think about an email address, an Instagram handle, the posters on your wall, the clothes you wear, the music you listen to. There may have been a time, and there may still yet be a time in community, where you would be named by the people around you, where you might be given, like, one of the most beautiful and flawed ideas I was offered as a child was, you can do anything. Beautiful. What a generous thing to say, and what a condemnation. How do you live up to that? You can be anything. Bloody Christ, what am I going to be then? How am I going to figure this out? I'm 38 and I'm still asking the question. But what if, when I was coming up, there were a group of people who said, we've been watching you. This is your rite of passage day. You're in that space between child and adult. You're going to leave the village as a child and come back as an adult. And these are the things we've seen in you. A, B, C, D, E. Whether you take them or not, that's up to you. But here are some of the things we've seen about you. So we're back to naming again. We're back to kenning again. What if we were kenned rather than trying to name ourselves? And that's what this project is about. Love that. Which is the power of naming. And I have a challenge for those listening, and for you, Dan, which is imagine that I've just given you a lavish compliment. The response that we offer to that compliment may well be one of the golden keys to unlock the challenges of modern society. If you defer and say, "Oh no, that old thing," or if you reflect back immediately and say, "No, but you brought beautiful things," if you say anything except "thank you" and push away the compliment, a few things happen all at the same time. On the bottom end of a sliding scale is a compliment. At the top end of that sliding scale is being given grace, being honoured. Imagine you walked into a room and somebody laid a blanket down for the chair you're about to sit on and put their forehead on the ground down in front of you and honoured you. In the way that we sometimes do with trees, where we sometimes do when I go fishing and I put my head down on the cliffs and I say, I don't know who I'm speaking to or who the greater than me is, but if I catch a fish today, I'll eat the thing and I'll feed my family with it. That's the deal I'm brokering. At the bottom end of that scale is a gentle compliment, and at the top end of that scale is being honoured and being offered grace. Here's the thing that unlocked it for me, which is why I say I think this might be something as simple as that. How do you accept grace from other people? There's a guy called Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, started the Saging International movement, and again died, isn't with us anymore. And he had this. You can get hold of it. There's an audio recording called "The Spiritual Eldering," and he has a talk where he's got a hall full of older people, and he says, "What would happen if we lined you up to honour you by how old you were? What happened if we put the 90-year-olds in the front row, then the 80-year-olds, then the 70-year-olds?" And you can hear in the audience this cackling, like, energy of no, don't do that to me. Don't show me up like that. And the way he puts it is, he says, "How are you gonna be in your body in receipt of grace? Because weren't you, when you were young, looking around for people to bless? Weren't you desperately looking around for someone older than you to bless? And there wasn't anybody there. So you who are stepping towards elderhood, you who are on the journey towards elderhood, who I judge we all are, by the way. It's a journey. It's an ongoing thing. It's incumbent on those of us who are willing to practice an idea of elderhood to be able to accept grace, to be able to say, not even thank you, but you are welcome. If I say to you, you were beautiful today and you helped me and you opened my heart and what you made for dinner was delicious, you're welcome. That's the same thing as when I experienced trauma, when I went towards people and said, this thing has happened to me and I feel broken and lost and I don't know what to do and I'm showing the whites of my eyes to the world more than I'm showing my focus. When they responded with, modern medicine is incredible, miracles happen, this is the worst thing I've ever heard, do you want a cup? Platitude, 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 platitude. What they never did was say, I've heard you and I legitimize it. So when someone offers you a compliment, offers you grace, recognizes you just for being an older being that they are, if you're able to let them bless you, suddenly I have this image, and I know I've been on a bit of a monologue here, but I have this image which is
Rambling welcome, remember.
Thank you. You're welcome. It's there's a teenager on a bus coming home from school, same route for years, sitting separate from their friends. They've been in arguments, they're being bullied, they've been in and out of love, they don't know what's going on with their body, they don't know what's going on with social media, they don't know what their career is going to be, they don't know what house they're going to live in, they don't know where they're going to be in the world, they don't even maybe know that these are even things that they're allowed to think about. And every single day on the way home there's an old person sweeping their drive, and this young person gets off the bus 2 stops early one day and walks up to this old person and says, look, my life is in turmoil, but you offer me some solidity. There's something, every time I see you sweeping the drive, you offer me something which makes me feel a bit more okay, and I just want to say thank you. I'm a storyteller, and half of my job is not explaining or going into the exegesis of what a story means and what it's for, so I'm not going to. But what would an image like that be reflecting onto how our society would be different than it is today?
Gosh. I was last year I had a conversation with a wonderful human called Azul, who's part of the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures Collective, and she was talking about how and they work a lot with, in their collective they have a lot of indigenous researchers, and obviously a lot of their work is trying to sort of, in their words, like help compost the Western disease of separation, but they would talk a lot about how she would say, when they work with these indigenous researchers, you're born into the community to become an elder. That's what you are. That's what you are as a human. That's what the purpose is. You're born to become an elder of that community, and that's made implicit from day one. That's what we're here to do. And that's what we're here to do in our community, is to raise good elders. And so again, it's this sort of, it's a very active, intentional. It's the big thread that's holding. That's what we're here to become.
Yeah.
And I think of this culture, or the culture that I'm a part of. Let's say the Western, this UK culture, where the idea of eldership, unless you're working on the edges, right? But in the mainstream, it doesn't exist as far as I can tell.
Yeah,
it's about you're going to retire. You're an old person.
Yes.
You're not an elder.
Yeah,
or you're becoming old.
There are no queues of young people waiting for pearls of wisdom at the bus stop.
Right.
The post office queues there'd be crowds of people around if we put any stock in
Yeah.
in elderhood as something beneficial to us.
Yeah. And so I know that, I'm from what I understand about this, this is the ground that you're working with, right?
Yeah.
This is the moment. What is the intention of the work? Who are we trying to speak to here?
Yeah. Well, there's a who is this for and who is this with?
Uh-huh.
The reason I say there's a with and there's a for, and they're the same, but they'll be at different times and in different energies. And I just want to pick up on that that reference point to this coming from a kind of pre-modern. The word indigenous I'm really interested in at the moment. Is like I'm curious to see how it morphs and what it means as time goes on. When sustainable came in and then green came in and then when you were like, I'm wondering what's going to happen to that word and if we're going but
what is it?
Yeah,
because I'm often thinking again that's how do we become indigenous again?
Which is where we're at, right? Yeah, exactly.
That's where we're at, right?
So mythology, getting older, being of a place, indigeneity.
Yeah.
They're all in the same idea. What is it to be an elder here, and what is it to have reference points, inferences, guidance, and mentors from people who still have an intact culture of elderhood and haven't let go of it?
Right.
So there's a call here to anyone who's listening who is responding to indigenous in terms of there being an unbroken line of, say, elderhood or ritual ceremony mythology. Please come towards this. Please show me challenge. Please help me tie some threads together, which I've been doing actually as we've been speaking and recognizing that one of my reference points is Band of Brothers, which comes by and by from the mythopoetic men's movement, which comes by and by from indigenous cultures in North America. So it is at least partly informed by that directly. And there's work to do there. Mac McCartney says it's great to have ceremonies around some of the herbs and cacao and things that come from other places. Where's the nettle ceremony? Where's the blackberry ceremony? So there's work around guidance from other places to honor that and to be guided by it, and also to do the thing ourselves and find our own ceremony. So just wanted to say that because there's a good piece missing, and I'm open and looking for people who might guide that part of the conversation. Who is this kind of for? Who might respond to this? Well, that's the really interesting part of the conversation, is that as I've been doing this over the last few years, I've recognized, and partly why maybe this needs renaming, is that hitting the nail on the head, having a conversation with someone about elderhood, scares away a good majority of people. Speaking to older people about elderhood who haven't done their work, I'm doing air quotes for people that are just listening to the audio here, done their work, is like, I had a conversation with a guy on a train where we had a really nice conversation, and he was a stranger, and at the end I said, look, I'm getting off at the next stop. Is there anything you would say to yourself as a younger man? And he changed. His whole body changed. His face blushed. He became more rigid. He looked around at the other people as though he would be judged for imparting some sort of wisdom on me. And he said something platitudinal, like something about the lottery numbers. I'd given the lottery numbers. A whole conversation of depth and wisdom and beauty, which turned into just being completely like constipated the second I said something which put a nail on the head of, I'm asking you to be an elder. So there's something about people who aren't ready for this. And here's a challenge for those of an age. If you are in the winter of your life and still responding to the world with references to the spring of your life, I'm 80, but I still feel like a 17-year-old. I'm curious about some of the things that maybe you didn't do in spring and summer and autumn that you might reconsider. I really take joy from a young, vibrant soul in an old body. And I think there's something to go alongside that of recognizing one's age, of recognizing the rings in the tree. And so the manifesto and the work around it, and some of the workshops that have been happening, some of the conversations like this, the current state of working out in the open and saying, please come towards this in any way that's meaningful to you. And there will be a way to do that, which we'll alight on at the end of the conversation. Is currently the language of how we're describing older people is not fit for purpose. It is a hangover from the Industrial Revolution. We've only been doing it for a couple of 100 years after thousands of years of not doing this. Gone past the best years of my life, over the hill, long in the tooth, old, retiree, infirm, elderly, bent back. These are bent-backed words which are suggestive of the idea that aging means decline. Which, even if you're being generous, is not a whole truth. There's more to this. And I think if we can play with our language, we will simultaneously bring our communities back together. We will have voices in the room that have experience around grief, repeated cycles of seasons, the ability to say what is real and call elephants into the room because they're not representing an organization or trying to get to some other strata of having performed something in their lives. They've experienced death. They've experienced things. And here's the kicker. You cannot retire from the meta-crisis. You cannot retire from the meta-crisis. If you're getting towards the wintering of your life, then you are the fastest growing cohort of people in the world. There are going to be more over 65s in 2080 than under 18s. It has to be engagement. It has to be involvement. It has to be community. It has to be wisdom. It has to be... And it doesn't have to be vibrant, and you don't have to use your body, and I understand tiredness and I understand priority, but the opportunity of re-engaging that cohort of people with what is real and alive in the world at the moment, it's just, to me, it's just an endless proposition. And I have one final thing to add here, which is, if you're in an organization, there is a difference between elders and leaders. When you, as a leader, announce something hard to your people, let's say there's a merger and 200 people are informed that jobs are going to be lost and it's going to be a hard time, who they look at in the room are the elders. Where they go, to the water cooler, to the pub, to the atrium, to the wherever, is the safe space, and the people they choose to go with are their elders. So the question you asked me earlier, when do you become an elder? You can't be an elder of nothing, in the same way you can't be a leader without followers. You're an elder in the context of the people that judge you to be elder. So this piece of work at the moment is a phase 1 of 2, which is a preparation. You can lead the horses to water, but you can't make them drink. So let's make the water as nourishing and vital as possible in case one of them looks and wants to start drinking.
Gosh. It's complex, isn't it, in some ways, in many ways, because I even think about, even what you were talking about, the culture that glorifies youth, right? Yeah. Which is to stay looking young, in whatever way that is. And so there's a whole thing that's kind of telling you to be young. And then there's this other thing saying, what would it mean to be elder? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's coming up for me. Like this kind of, again, that I guess it's the contradiction that we're living in, this big fucking contradiction all the time.
Yeah.
This paradox, this sort of... Yeah. And it's also making me think about men. It's also making me think about men that I know who are struggling to continue to play that role of, the man that knows what to do, to have work, to hold down work as you become older. Particularly if you've been part of what I would call now probably the sort of abstract industries, where we've been sort of finding our relevance through, sitting behind screens or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And as we become older, as AI begins to eat more and more in, it's getting harder for many people. But I'm seeing it a lot in men that aren't not older. I'm talking in their 50s.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that's troubling people just in how to show up, full stop. And then we're talking about how to become elder. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's so many things pulling on people, on their identity and what their role is. How do they continue to fit in? And so it's making me think about how... You spoke about wisdom, about remembering what we already know, but perhaps that's such a big part of this, because in order to create those kind of space or the ability for more people to remember again, to sort of see that eldership is possible, and needed, and potentially beautiful and all of that stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of trying to process, I guess, what feels like, wow, this is big, because there's a lot. We're carrying all of these different identities and voices, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, who am I?
Who am I going to be now? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the culture is whipping you along.
Yeah. Well, the thing. So the manifesto has some really practical elements in it that are things that I've seen and I've observed, and I'm suggesting some strong bits, some pitfalls. There are going to be, that. For example, if this goes, Daniel Schmachtenberger again, he talks about yellow teaming. So red teaming is the idea of like when you've got a concept and you're developing it, you get together and you look at all the ways it could go wrong and you mitigate. Yellow teaming is you look at all the ways it could go really, really well and what the challenges might be, and you mitigate around that. And I've been playing around with the idea of yellow teaming in this project. And for example, if there was a really powerful campaign and all of a sudden thousands of people stood up and said, "I'm an elder now," you better listen to what I have to say, and like drives bigotry and goes further. There's a challenge here around a kind of like, well, I'm an elder now.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's the humility, isn't it?
Right. So there are, yeah, exactly. And so there are challenges in it, but there are some really practical elements of it. And that's why I bring it back to how well can you accept a compliment? Because in that you have two parties. You have some beauty passing between you. You have some moment of interrelation. You have some moment of seeing what happens. And the real simplicity of it is, for those listening who are interested in this idea, and it does sound big and it does sound nebulous, but it also sounds obvious because it's one of those like, oh yeah, of course we should be doing this. Why haven't we been? It's just noticing the language, noticing the names that you're giving yourself and others. And by the way, this really relates to people that are even younger. Whatever language you choose for older people is what you're labeling your future self. What do you want to be? Do you accept that aging means decline? Do you accept that when you've had a life of experience and like an ancient oak, you've seen things pass you by and you can think in longer terms than quarterly reports and 4-year terms, and you can see the world ahead and you can see into the eyes of the children that are going to inherit this world? Do you really think that sounds like the description of someone who's in a position of decline? Of course there's physical decline, of course there is, but the apple falls from the tree and eventually rots, but we don't want perpetual apples, do we? Don't we want there to be a process? Don't we want spring again?
So it sounds like, as again, when I'm listening, like a kind of, when we we do this, when we've gathered for a couple of days on the land, we might put each person on a throne and we might witness them. Do you know what I mean? And really give them that, what we truly see in them, right?
Yeah.
So I'm imagining, I don't know, that's coming up for me. Like,
Yeah.
what would it look like to sort of, to kind of, create space for our elders and help them become elders through that, through starting with even a practice like that. Do you know what I mean? Of where we actually tell them what we really think.
Well, I think the beauty of what you're describing there, though, is that it's you're the conduit, you and your team, and the idea that you have and the land that you have, and that you have an experience. People feel called to this work, to this place. They go through an experience, and part of your process is that putting a fine point on it and saying, "Hey, older people, refinement, not retirement. Let's play around with that idea. Are you interested in changing this story? What do you think about us calling you elders?" Like Winky Bumhole, There's I'm not sure that I'm ready for that experience. So putting a fine point on it, but to call back to John Alexander and kind of the citizening of it, it's just like, what is it to self-start? What is it to have a feast night in your village? What is it to have a community day locally, a tree planting day locally? Where let me give you an example. I was working with a client. You mentioned earlier, a chunk of my work is programs and culture around learning and development and facilitating that sort of space. I was working with a client where there were in the region of 70 participants, 2 of us holding the space, and we had 6 facilitators that we'd brought in support of us, and one of those facilitators was an older man. And as part of the process of ceremonializing this work, we told them all of the thresholds as we were going through. You've arrived, that's a threshold. You've eaten together, that's a threshold. This team of 6 has arrived, that's a threshold. And then we, like Russian dolls, at the end, we went back out each of the thresholds. So one of the thresholds was, these 6 people are leaving you now. Just so you know, this is real, this is ending, this is coming to an end. Like, you know, come towards your grief. You've made some really lovely friends and really connections. Like allow the grief of this into your body now, because if you don't, you're either pushing it down or it's going to happen when you're on the way home anyway. So let's do it together. These 6 people are leaving now. The beginning of the end is here. And that older man, who was one of the guys that we brought in, just unprompted, just said, I just want to say, this is an international group. We've been doing really hard work here. And for some of you, this is your 3rd language. And I cannot come close to understanding how difficult it must be to be doing this work at all, let alone in your 3rd language. And the whole room breathed out, because we'd all been experiencing these people that are speaking in their 3rd language coming up to us for coffee, like that kind of nervousness of like, how am I going to hold this? Because I don't want to just wade in with my English and not being able to speak that. That was a moment of pure elderhood. A, it wasn't invited. B, it wasn't set up around the idea of elderhood. And C, it was calling out a truth that brought the whole room closer together and made it more of a real human, authentic experience. It was whether or not he decoupled his popularity from his opinion or not, he called an elephant out in the room that I hadn't even really noticed was there until he did it. And it was extraordinary. And so, I think part of the process of this is having like agents of change, anyone who's listening to this, being wary of the language and the practices, just in their engagements in groups, and seeing if you can seed in moments. See if there's a moment where you can sidle up to someone who's older than you or that you judge has been an elder to you in some way and say, could you take this role? Can I honor you in this way? Would you suggest this? You know, and micro moments, I think, is going to be part of this journey.
Beautiful. So where does it go next? Like where are you at? Let's give us a quick sense of where it's at. Where's it go next, and how might folks become involved?
Okay, so where it is I got stuck in a rut for a while around perfectionism. I wrote about 30,000 words, and then I sat down with an hourglass for an hour. I work a lot with sand timers, for an hour, and I got a pen out and I said, whatever you've written goes out. So I wrote these pages in pen, I took photos of them and I stuck them on the internet. A few people engaged with that. About 5 months later, I've turned it into a more cohesive manifesto. So where we're at is there is a manifesto. You can find it at recallingfire.com/elder. And whatever we can do to make that accessible and easy to find. You can read the manifesto. You can read some of the challenges it suggests. You can please be in touch, suggesting changes, challenges, celebrations, allies, places. And where it goes next might be that it forms into something more formal. It might be that it becomes its own thing, a charity, a CIC or something. It might be that it just becomes a movement. I don't know. It doesn't have a home yet. But the next phase is, let's say, a meeting, a gathering of people to come around, to try some of it out, to try and break it, to try and bring in what it might look like, and then to go away with a practice and a methodology. So there is a manifesto. I don't know where it's going. The interim feels like a working group.
Beautiful. But there's energy around it, isn't there? I can see that there's something going on.
Yeah,
so
it's hitting a nerve. There's already a group of people that are engaging with it. There's a list of contributors at the end that you can kind of poke your nose in and see allies that are out there. But yeah, I've been playing around with mythology for 5.5 years now, and for my part, it's one of the most powerful things I've ever bumped into. But it does feel a bit difficult to take towards people who aren't ready to come towards it. This feels materially different. This feels sticky. I mentioned this, and it goes into conversations around organizations, communities, families, homes. It sparks memories. I did a workshop at Blue Earth Summit a couple of weeks ago, and the primary moment in that was a challenge for people, which was at one end of the scale is Shrinking Violet, at the other end of the scale is Showboat, and in the middle of that scale is Standing in Your Power. And it was an hour of challenging people to tell strangers what they were beautiful for, without any omission or apology, and it was glorious.
Wow.
And there'll be more of that.
I love that. So it's definitely not about getting old people working again. Because that's what I mean. That's sort of what we're bumping up against.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. No, I love that, and I think it's beautiful, and I love it. And thank you for starting a fire around it all, and let's see if we can see where it goes, and we can be helpful. But it's certainly it's just this conversation. It just sparks so much for me, and it is this at the same time I'm trying to work. We're starting to work with younger men, and we are elders. I'm saying it now because it's happening, know. But again, it's this. For me, it's hard to separate this stuff because it all feels like we're dealing with this peak separation, right? But we're trying to start bringing these connections back again.
Yes.
So that the future, whatever that is down the line, that we see this interconnectivity, right?
And that's it. See is another word of kenning, noticing. I think, like, noticing what you are noticing. What are you noticing? How many red cars did you see on the road today? Don't know, wasn't looking. Cognitive bias kicks in. If you start looking for red cars, you'll see them everywhere. If you start looking for elderhood, mythology, initiation, community, it's there. It's there, and it's beautiful. And if you can make sure that the thing that's truest, this is Daniel Schmachtenberger again, is getting the most attention, that might be the way that we move forwards. And as we sort of round down and come towards what feels like a close here, I'll say that Fountain of Youth as a story and as a mythology and as a time that we're living in is a phrase that we use. Fountain of Youth means something to us. The story itself the onion just peels and peels and peels and peels, and there is a recording of that story. So the small and gentle, slowly building podcast that I've been starting is called Drop the Map, and the episode on there about Fountain of Youth is followed up with an interview, which will be released any day now, with the one of the elders being interested in the word of elder in the Recalling Fire community, Alice Harwood, and it's a conversation about all of this that goes a bit further into that particular story. So if you're interested in that, go find that. Go listen.
We'll link to that.
Lovely, thank you.
So I'm gonna ask you just a couple of closing questions.
Great.
If I can. Beautiful. How does the invitation Becoming Crew? How does it speak to you at this moment? What does it manifest or suggest?
Dan, I've already said this to you today, but this metaphor has been working in me and it started because there was a rub. I found it difficult and I didn't know why, and I wanted it to. It's something about where are the stories and who is the custodian of them. I had this image of like going to find the captain's log, to be able to read back about the aeons past of Spaceship Earth and what challenges we've had and how we overcame them, and then realizing that if the captain wrote them, then the captain, the winner of the story, the one who's telling the story, might not be telling the whole truth, might only be telling enough that tells his legacy story as well as what was happening on the ship. So something about what are the scuff marks on the walkways. What are the stories of how we do things here? What are the stories and who is the custodian of those stories, and how do they change based on where I'm getting them from? What's the rumor? What's the rumor of the earth?
And what might that invitation of Becoming Crew ask in your local ecosystems? Would it be the same?
Oh, good question. And yes, it's the same. I am so chuffed with myself to be able to sit here today and say that this is how things have lined up. I held, as part of the process, including going to different places and speaking and having great podcasts and writing a manifesto, I also held a day in my village hall and put signs up around the village saying, "Are you old?" If yes, if no, and 3 older people came, and the image for me was that the people that work in the corner shop and the people that drive the buses are engaging in this conversation as much as it's within the systems change world of everything that's out there. So yeah, what's the rumor of this place? How does the rubber hit the road? Yeah,
beautiful. I love that. Thank you for doing that. And that's the thing. And I think that's just that invitation, isn't it? It's like, how we show up in our local ecosystems is possibly, maybe that's the, that idea of you putting up those posters. I love that. So I hope we can manifest and encourage and all kinds of that stuff going on around this spaceship. Okay, last thing. If there was a kind of an offering that you could make to listeners, it could be a provocation, it could be a practice, it could be a little mission, something that folks could play with.
See if you can recall some of the stories you were raised with, and take that as broadly as you like. But I'm hinting specifically at the fairy tale stuff. See if you can move towards that. Just go exploring. See what happens when you have a conversation with your younger self. See what happens when once upon a time is offered to you in a space of deeper meaning, and just see. Have a crack. Just see what happens. I dare you, by the way, to do that. That's a dare.
You heard it. Love it. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for all that you do. And yeah, I wish you well with all of this, and it's just beautiful. And I'm just excited to be connected in to this, to what you do, and this question, and all of these questions. And yeah, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to close with, any reflection, anything you want to tell us about.
Okay, so 2 things. First is a short Mary Oliver poem, which is The Uses of Sorrow. It's only 3 lines. The opening line is italicized and in brackets. In my sleep I dreamed this poem. Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift. So there's an old couple in a hut on a mountain at the edge of a forest in Japan, and she's a weaver and he's a woodcutter, and every day they do the same things. They have breakfast together, they drink tea together, and then he goes out into the world and she stays at home. She weaves, he cuts, she weaves, he cuts, she weaves, he cuts. He goes out and he goes into the forest, and it's a baking hot day. He's got one of those big wide-brimmed hats on, and he gets to a pool of water that he's never seen before. Takes his hat off, gets down on his knees and drinks the water. And he sees in his reflection the wrinkles rushing away from his face, the crow's feet disappearing, the jowl of his jaw tightening, his many frowns and his many moments of laughter disappearing as his forehead gets tauter and his hair gets thicker and his shoulders get broader and his legs get stronger, and he stands up and he legs it home, and he runs, and he gets home and he bangs on the door, and his wife opens the door, this old woman, and she says, "Yeah, how can I help you, young man?" He says, no, it's me, it's me. And she's closing the door on him, and he has to do all of the things. I love this, imagining how I would do this. All of the things that only he would do, so that she could recognize him. Just pause there for a minute. Oh, the little dances, the jokes, the nods, the whatever it is, does all of that stuff. So she believes him, and she pushes straight past him when she goes out into the forest. And he's waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And she doesn't come back, and the sun starts to go down. And he eventually goes out looking for her, and he goes through the trees, and he gets back to the pool of water, and she's not there. And there is just a bundle of her clothes. And he goes up to the bundle, and he recognises actually that in the middle there's a baby. And they look into each other's eyes with just a depth of sorrow. And he picks up the bundle and the baby and walks back to the hut. That story is called The Fountain of Youth.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
Beautiful. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sam around the fire at Ghostwood Down. There's so much in that. I received a lot, and I hope you did too. If you do, please do share it with someone else. Please get in touch. Let us know what's alive for you from that conversation, and do check out Sam's work. The links to the Eldership project. It's all in the show notes. Right, I will do just one little announcement for a learning adventure that we are offering through our Action Learning Collective at Becoming Crew. This will be the 4th year. This is a winter learning adventure called Into the Dark. Now, I don't know about you, but if you ever get to this time of year, as the year comes to an end and you're sort of, you're crawling towards the end of it. I'm often crawling somewhere, crawling into the darkness. And then suddenly it's like, oh, it's the new year. And like, what are your goals and what are you going to do? And how can anyone possibly, know any of that anymore with the current shit state of everything? But in the last 4 years, we have been convening groups towards the end of January in a much more slower, intentional exploration of this darker time of the year. And we're asking that kind of question, like, well, what would happen if we sort of tuned into paying attention to this slower, darker cycle and resisted the urge to jump into growth and acceleration that modernity expects us to? And maybe perhaps consider why every other species is somehow in a darker, stiller, slower time. Perhaps there's something we could learn from tuning into that. And what would it look like if we entered a container over 5 weeks, which allowed us to, in some ways, co-create our intentionality, our orientation for the year ahead, if you like, with not just our own separate selves, but by tuning into other intelligences, other ways of knowing, tuning into the landscapes around us, the more than human world, the ancestral intelligence, and the intelligence of being part of a community of fellow human inquirers. It's a really beautiful journey. It's the 4th year we're doing it. You can find all the details in the link below. If you've got questions, just reach out and get in touch. But registrations are open. It's a beautiful, powerful way to begin the year. And, my sense from what I observe every year doing this work, and I do it as well now, it's default for me and my fellow guides as to how we begin our own orientation at the start of the year. But so much possibility comes up by exploring these darker parts, these darker moments, opening up to other ways of knowing that the culture of modernity just doesn't encourage us to tune into. So that's it. If you're interested, check out the link below. Get in touch. Right. Look after yourselves out there. We'll be back sometime when the light begins to return. Until next time. Peace and out.
This podcast is created in service to life, for you. It takes time, funds and energy to make. If you'd like to contribute to the running costs, you can donate the price of a cuppa or a pint. Find the link on our website. This podcast wouldn't exist without the following crew: Charlie Shread, Audio Jedi; Seemah Nahome-Burgess, Engine Room; Willow Burgess, Jingles.